Welcome to the latest Julia Computing webinar, Fast and Furious Development with JuliaHub Workflows. I'm Misha Saint-Amand, the head of marketing here at Julia Computing. Today, Deep Data will show how our platform, JuliaHub, can serve as an on-ramp for adoption and management of the Julia programming language in your organization. He'll be sharing a few key workflows and a few great opportunities that JuliaHub provides. Deep is Julia Computing's new product director. Previously, he was a senior product manager at JFrog. He led their partnership team through building DevOps-focused integrations. He has experience in startups, product R&D, engineering, and open source program management. And we're really thrilled to have him as part of the team. Now I'll pass things over to Deep and let him get us started.
All right, thank you, Misha. So hi. Welcome to the webinar. I'm pretty stoked to tell you a little bit more about JuliaHub and show you more of the workflows. As Misha mentioned, my name's Deep. And yeah, before this, I was working in DevOps. I've also spent a big part of my career as a community manager, helped start the open source program office at Indeed.com. So I love working with the community. I love working directly with individual developers. You've got my email right here. Please really do reach out. I'd love to talk to you and see how we can help, build solutions. Okay, so let's jump into the webinar. So the agenda for today is I'm going to start providing a really high-level overview of what makes Julia and the JuliaHub ecosystem so special. I'll walk you through, the JuliaHub UI, show you some of the navigation if you're not familiar with JuliaHub, and then I'll show you some of the easy ways to get started. Of course, after that, I will show you the Julia package registry. We will launch VS Code and the IDE experience and navigate through that a little bit. And once I've given you kind of an overview of what's happening on JuliaHub, we're going to go into the demos. So a big part of this webinar is actually the demos, and we're going to demo a few things for you. And after the demos, I'll take questions. If you have any questions that pop up sort of throughout my webinar, feel free to just type them into the chat. We can place them there. I'll read the chat at the end, or hold on to them and I'll get to them at the end of the webinar. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to do a couple different things today. I've broken up the demos in two flows, so it's a little bit easier to understand. The first demo flow is going to be pretty basic stuff. We're going to launch the IDE on JuliaHub. I'll show you how to use a package and a data set. Then I'm going to show you a really nice way to create your first Julia package. I'll explain some of the contents that get created in that template. Then we're going to just add that package to GitHub. And after we go through flow A, we're going to get into some stuff that's a little bit more advanced. The package we create is actually going to include a CI file, a ci.yaml, which I'll explain. And that's going to kick us off with a continuous integration process on a product within GitHub called Actions. After we go through the CI process with the Julia file, you'll actually get to see how that workflow works. And then we're going to come back to JuliaHub and we're going to go into a feature on JuliaHub called Projects, which actually pulls in your GitHub repository. And you can actually edit the code from that GitHub repository in the IDE. And the main benefit of Projects is that whether it is you or someone else editing the code on the same repo, Projects works with Git to keep all your changes in sync. So that way, like you're changing your code up, someone else is working on the same files. We make sure that all those changes stay in sync and you're not, overwriting someone else's code. Last, I will show you for this, newly generated Julia package that we're demoing today, how you can pull in your own packages into JuliaHub. So with that, let's kind of get started on the introduction of what JuliaHub is. So, for many of you, you're probably coming to this because you've got some familiarity with the Julia programming language, but you may not really have used JuliaHub, right? So you're asking, what is it? Primarily, it's a cloud managed service and computing platform that allows you to search and interact with Julia packages. We have the Julia package server and the REPL built right into the VS Code experience. You've got a few other things on JuliaHub, including products that the Julia team itself is building, and we'll look at some of those. We also have, different development environments. So we've got the VS Code environment. We have Pluto notebooks, which are very similar to, Jupyter notebooks used in data documentation. And JuliaHub, again, because it's a cloud managed service, it gives you access to infrastructure that you might not have on your local machine. So I'll show you very briefly on JuliaHub that you can spin up a new job or a new instance with CPU resources or GPU resources, and you can scale up and scale down that resource depending on sort of how much data and how much compute power you actually need. Lastly, we'll show you, again, some of the features that are coming out on JuliaHub, including the project's editor. All right, so some of you might know the goal of the Julia programming language is to provide ease of use without sacrificing speed. So what this really means is that the language and the ecosystem reduce the burden of, different types of programmers having to build large production data sets and algorithms and models with different programming languages and different frameworks. Julia, the language, is meant to be kind of a one-stop shop for all your high performance computing and modeling and simulation needs. In general, the ecosystem gives scientists, simulation modeling engineers, and student programmers a way to work with mathematical equations and build algorithms in a way that some of the more archaic frameworks just aren't focused on, right? So with JuliaHub, your whole team now has access to run extremely large data sets much faster than you would be on a local machine. We manage the infrastructure for you, and we provide you version control so that teams can collaborate and really get that performance at an organizational level in a way that you can't by yourself. So this is one of the reasons that Julia and JuliaHub are used by industries that have high performance needs. One example is Formula One race cars, right? So the ecosystem around the programming language was really built for this kind of performance. And you'll see some of the things you can do as we go into the demo. But I really want to mention that Julia, the open source community in Julia is continuously building and updating packages. Each of these packages provides, tons of out-of-the-box functionality, completely open to the public. And we're now working within JuliaHub to sort of bundle some of these packages, build some UI around them, really provide them as a product and a service so that you can get these high-performance modeling needs, done really quickly in a way that's super efficient for your whole organization. So as I mentioned, some of the things that we are currently working on and releasing. So we've got some products. One of them is the Julia Sim IDE experience that you're going to sort of see a little bit of today. Julia Sim is essentially a product that we put together that helps with scientific simulations. Another product that uses some of the same libraries is the Pumas product, and we've got the Pumas QSP product, which was built to help with quantitative systems pharmacology. A couple of the featured apps or features really on JuliaHub are the IDE and the Pluto experience. And these are sort of dedicated versions that are Julia specific, that bring in the Julia packages, the Julia ecosystem, and then help you, manage your environment with tools that help you with data sets, repository information, file editor, all accessible in one place, all on the cloud. So no matter where you are in the world, as long as you have internet access, you've got all your files all accessible there. So kind of wrapping up my talk about JuliaHub, again, I think the big focus for us as a company now is to give you sort of these supercomputing level features in a place that is extremely easy and accessible for you in a way that takes the burden off managing infrastructure. And this way you can just get right into what you're trying to do and let us handle the stuff you don't care about, right? So that is going to be the basis for some of the demos today. It's going to be very sort of straightforward, and I hope that you're able to follow along, and after the webinar, so try this out yourself. So let's get started. We're going to go to JuliaHub.com. I do want to note I'm going to be switching a few different screens. If anything, doesn't pop up, just let me know in the chat, and hopefully we'll get right back on track. So let me go ahead and I'm going to go to JuliaHub.com. So get started is, JuliaHub.com. You can create your JuliaHub account. There's a couple different ways that you can create an account and log in. I've already got something created, so I'm going to just continue with my Gmail, and I'm going to log in with my Julia Computing email address. And this is the first page you see when you log in. So on the top right, you've got your applications. By default, you're going to see the IDE and the Pluto experience. If you click on more, you'll see some of the other out-of-the-box applications and products that we provide. As I mentioned, you have Julia Sim. We'll also soon be releasing a Windows desktop application. And I think what's really important to let you know is, because these Julia packages are open source, you can build your own Julia-based products. And if you, spin up a Julia instance with us, a local instance for yourself or for your company, you can upload your applications they'll show up in the My Applications or the Registered Applications section. You can make them publicly available for the community or keep them, hosted privately in JuliaHub for your own use. Now going back, on the top left, you're going to see jobs. Obviously, on day one, you're not going to have any jobs started, but should you have jobs running and you need to sort of see what jobs are still up or what jobs have stopped, you've got a running list. You can actually click on a job, get specifications around the infrastructure and resources that were part of that job. And you've also got some logs and metrics that you can look at, right? So if you want to understand any performance issues, if a job fails, there are logs available. All that information is very easily accessible on JuliaHub. The last part I'll show you for now is scrolling down. We've got sort of some curated package information. You've got new packages, packages that have been recently updated. And then at the bottom, you're going to see some of the most popular packages. We are continuing to work on improving how we sort of make packages discoverable to you. A lot of those changes are going to come out early next year. But here on the bottom right, you've got keywords you can click on. So if you're looking for a package that serves a specific need, you can kind of go to one of those keywords. We have a specific packages section, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. But what I'm going to do is actually show you this same JuliaHub, but I'm going to show you my own instance of it, my team's instance. That's going to have some features that you're not going to see in just the out-of-the-box JuliaHub, but you can request your own instance and just talk to sales. We'll get you up and running on that. So let me reshare my screen really quick. Okay. So now what you should see is the URL of this instance is internal.juliahub.com. If you work for a company called, Blue Wall, you can get a domain that is bluewall.juliahub.com. That'll be your own local instance, still managed by us in the cloud. What I've got here on this local instance is I've got some Julia package registries that are local to my org, right? So you have the general registry. This has the open source packages in it. But should you want your own registry, you can actually request to have one created. And in your own registry, you can actually upload proprietary Julia packages. So if you want packages that are only used by your company, they're still available here in JuliaHub. You just get your own registry created and make those available to your team members. Going back to the general registry, one thing I want to show you is, when you click into a Julia package, you've got the README right there. You've got information about the dependencies of this package and any dependents that might exist. If you kind of scroll to the right, you're also going to see information such as the version number, links to the formal documentation. Some Julia package authors have their own homepage. You'll also get license information, the source repository, and the contributors. So again, our goal with the Julia package registry is just make it extremely discoverable so that you can find packages that help you serve your needs. Okay. So with all that being said, we're actually going to kind of start walking through the demo. Here on the application section, we're going to go ahead and we're going to connect to the Julia IDE. So I can hit the connect button. That's going to get me right into the IDE with the default configuration options. The other thing I can do is, let's say I wanted to launch an instance that doesn't use the default resources. I can click on custom, and here's where you can actually configure, whether you want to use CPU or GPUs. You can also change the number of jobs and cores that this instance runs on. We make it extremely easy to just scale up your infrastructure using this little modal window right here. But I'm going to go back. I'm just going to connect to the default instance. It's going to ask me to authenticate my account. So I'm going to log in with my Julia email. So once that gets started, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the VS Code experience UI. So first off, actually, I'm going to sort of reduce this for a minute. On the very left, you're going to see a couple different things that come bundled with this experience, right? You're going to see a testing suite. You're going to see the JuliaHub icon. And in the JuliaHub icon, you have your list of jobs that have been running. If your organization has uploaded data sets, you'll be able to access them right here very easily. You can also actually launch new instances and new jobs. So right here from the left-hand menu, JuliaHub icon, launch a new instance. You can have a version of the IDE that is running on CPUs. And then if you want another version that has more compute resources, launch a whole new instance right here. Underneath that icon, you're going to see the Julia Sim product. This has all the sort of modeling and simulation packages I mentioned before. There are a couple webinars around Julia Sim coming out, so feel free to check those out. And that's all included right here in JuliaHub. Last, you're going to see an icon for the Julia language itself. One thing I really like here is there's a very easy way to navigate through the general package registry. You can see all your core Julia packages when you click around. So here we've got just every, functional package in the Julia community right here, extremely accessible. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just kind of walk us through a couple things. I'm going to refresh the REPL, and the REPL is really just what Julia calls our command line interface. In the REPL, there's a few sort of really basic things. You'll know that you're in the Julia REPL because it'll say Julia. If you want to switch to shell mode, you just hit apostrophe, and it'll switch to the shell. Hit backspace or delete, it'll go back to the REPL. You can also click on the right bracket, and the right bracket is going to take you into the package server. And you're going to see this, but this is basically where you import packages that you want to use here in the command line or when you're developing, your Julia apps. Okay. So to start the demo, what I want to do is actually show you just a really basic way that, you load a data set in Julia. So I've already sort of included a Julia package called load_zoo. You can see the code here. It uses some data frames and CSV packages. And I've got a data set. It's just called zoo.csv. So using this data set and sort of running it in the REPL is pretty easy. Just a couple commands. I'm just going to pull up my notes so that I can just copy and paste very quick. So to import a package, you're just going to type import pkg, and let me make this a little bigger. I've already done a lot of these steps, so the REPL is just going to tell me that this has already been done. And once you've hit import pkg, Julia knows that you're about to add packages. The package that I'm going to add in this example is the package called CSV. I'm then also going to add a secondary package called data frames. So we're going to let the REPL sort of add that really quick. Okay, so we've added the CSV package and there's been no changes. Great. Okay, let's do one more. Okay. So now that we've added those packages, we're going to tell the Julia REPL to use them. And so that is as easy as typing using, and then you just type in the packages that you're going to use. And now what I'm actually going to do is create a instruction for Julia, and using those packages, and what it's going to do is it's going to read my CSV file, and it's just going to spit out the results on the screen. Now, this demo, it's very basic, but this is just showing you if you need to manipulate your data frames, the load a CSV file. It's basically how you can do it using these kinds of packages. So if we give this a couple seconds, it'll spit out the zoo.csv, and there we go. All right. So now that we know kind of how to use sort of the REPL in general, I'm going to walk us through how to create our first Julia package. So to create a Julia package, we're going to bring in a Julia library that's called pkg templates. So I'm going to hit the right bracket, and that's going to switch me to the package server mode. Bringing a package is very easy. You type in add, and then the package name. So this one is called pkg templates. And after that's been added to your environment here, we're going to go back to the regular REPL, and we're going to use this template. So as you saw before, to use a package, you just type in the keyword using and then the package name. And now the REPL is waiting for the set of instructions. So to generate a new Julia package using this template, I've got a sort of function that I'm going to write into here. Let me see if I can make it a tiny bit bigger. So I've just copied and pasted this in. So this has that t equals template. And in my template, I'm going to make sure that gets generated to my code directory so that you guys can see it here up on the screen. The user is data.x, that's my GitHub name, license MIT, author myself, and then we're going to activate some Git-based plugins. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And now I can use that template to generate a new package. So for today's demo, we're going to create a package. We'll just call it demo package 10 because today is the 10th. And once I hit enter, what you're going to start seeing on the left-hand side is now there is a new Julia package called demo package 10. So we're going to sort of look through the contents of this folder. Inside the folder, there's a bunch of options that were generated through the template. In the GitHub folder, we have some YAML files. The CI YAML file is actually going to kick off our continuous integration, which I will demo later. In the source folder, we're going to see the actual package code. So you've got the demo package 10.jl file. This is where you write the code for your Julia package. We also have a folder here for tests. So we've got a template set up. If you need to create some unit tests, you can put that right into the run test.jl. We also have the license information. We have the manifest, right, that sort of tracks all the metadata associated with this Julia package. And we have the project TOML. In the project TOML, you're going to see the package name. You're going to see a UUID. You'll see the authors and the version. Any dependencies that get added to this package you've created will also be part of the project.toml file. And the last thing here to show you is that PKG templates automatically creates a README. So if you're familiar with GitHub, you don't have to create a README. It'll already be included. Okay, so now that we've created our new package called demo package 10, the next step is to actually upload this package to GitHub so that I can show you the CI in the next steps. Now, if you already have GitHub created, great. If you don't, you can just go to github.com, create an account. I'm not going to show you how to do that here. And once you've got a GitHub account, you go ahead and you create a new repository. So a repository is just a high-level directory where you can store your code, your folders, your data sets. I'm going to give this repository name the same name that we have for the package. So going back to the package name, we called it demo package 10. So I'm going to call this demo package 10. And the most important thing when you create a new repository for Julia packages on GitHub is to make sure that you give them the .jl extension. This is so GitHub knows that these are going to be Julia packages. You don't need to mess with any of these other options. A lot of them are included in the template for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit create. And this is going to create the repository. Now that I've got the repository created, it's going to ask me to initialize, this information back inside my VS Code instance. I already have SSH keys created. If you are using GitHub for the first time, you do need to create your SSH keys. I won't show you that full step, but I will tell you that you can find them under settings. So if you go to settings, SSH, you'll create the SSH keys in the Julia REPL, and you'll actually add them here in the settings area. Okay. So since I already have SSH created, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the code right here, and this is going to initialize a connection between my GitHub get and the get version control inside the Julia VS Code instance. So going back here, first, what I'm going to do just to make sure for this demo is I'm going to remove any default Git remotes that exist, and I actually need to be in the folder. This is very important. You need to be in the folder where the package lives. So I'm going to right click on the package and I'm going to open up a new integrated terminal inside that folder. And now I'm going to connect this to Git. So again, just for my sake, I'm going to remove anything that was there by default. Now, Git remote, remove origin. There we go. Okay. So now that I've done that, I can take a look at the instructions from GitHub. Let's do this one at a time, just so you're kind of following along. So what we're doing is we're adding sort of a pointer to the origin of the Git repository that you created here. So I'm going to copy that, and it's saying the Git remote. So the remote is the pointer, and we're adding the origin, and the origin is this, basically Git URL right here. So that's the first thing. The next thing is making sure that it points to the main branch in this repository. And the last step is to actually push all of the code up to that main branch. Okay, so one thing it'll ask once you do that is a fingerprint, a key. Again, this is just for security and authentication. So I'm going to say yes. And now I've got my, connection authenticated, and this package code that we have here in the IDE should have been pushed up to GitHub. So if we refresh, we now see that the same package contents are in my GitHub repository. Cool. And you've got the README and the source files, and everything works as expected. Great. Okay, so that was basically sort of the first demo flow. So just to sort of reiterate, we launched the IDE experience on JuliaHub. We, generated a new Julia package with the PKG templates, and then we basically connected to GitHub, and we've just pushed up all of our changes to our GitHub repository with the same name. Now I'm going to breathe for a second and take a sip of this coffee. Yep. Always have coffee on hand when you're working with Git. Okay. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to jump into the second part of our demo. In the second part of our demo, I'm going to talk a little bit about this concept of continuous integration. So to do that, we're going to go back to my slides just for a minute. And that way I can explain to you what it means to do continuous integration in the Julia ecosystem. Okay, let's share these slides. Great. So CI, or continuous integration, exists because the problem that we want to solve is, in modern software development, you're not building all of your applications usually by yourself, especially if you work for a company. You've got dozens of developers changing code all at the same time. If you already have an app running in production and it's being updated, say weekly, daily, hourly, a lot of different people are working on your files. What we want to solve with CI is essentially, how do we keep all these changes in sync? And how do we make sure that we're doing, the right kind of unit tests, security tests, software composition analysis that's going to make sure that your app and your microservices are safe and nothing breaks throughout the course of the application. So every time, a new change is made, what we can do with CI is we can have all of these tests done automatically. And if something breaks, you'll basically be informed. And we're going to see a little bit more of that today. So again, the solution is a formal continuous integration process. In this demo, we're going to use GitHub Actions to do the CI, but there are a lot of other CI vendors out there. And the reason this is important for Julia is because we're working in such close alignment with our open source community. Beautiful packages are being built every day. We use many of these packages internally, and we do have CI set up through GitHub Actions as well as another vendor called BuildKite. This helps us keep all our internal apps in sync, including the microservices and products that make up JuliaHub. Okay. So what you're going to see now as we sort of jump back into the demo part of this presentation, in this screenshot, you've got this like 4-box structure, and you're going to see this live, but essentially the package template that we use to generate our new Julia package has a file called ci.yaml, and it comes with a very basic matrix of tests. And these tests basically make sure that your package is still compatible with different versions and different architecture environments for the Julia language. What the continuous integration environment and workflow is going to show you is that you can create different jobs in your CI pipeline, and each job can represent a different stage of your software development lifecycle. So here we're going to have like a job for our out-of-the-box matrix of testing the Julia package versions. Then we're going to have a job maybe that is our staging environment, which I can just call start. You might have a job after that that kicks off your builds. And should that job pass, maybe you move all your Julia code into your production ready environment. Before I show you how all that works for real, I do want to mention that, different organizations have different CI. So there's no sort of like one-stop shop. Everyone kind of creates their CI in a way that serves them best. All right, so let me stop sharing the presentation and we're going to go back into GitHub. Okay, so back in GitHub, what I want us to do next is we're going to go to the Actions tab here. So as I mentioned, our template already has a basic sort of CI file set up. It just says files generated by PKG templates. If we click into that, we're going to get this view of our pipeline. But what I really want us to do first is actually go in and look at the file code. So if we click on ci.yaml, we're going to start seeing the actual code that is in the YAML file. This is, again, sort of the out-of-the-box code that comes with the PKG template. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste my own sort of YAML structure into this. And then I'm going to walk you through what that structure actually does. So let me go grab that really quick. Okay. Okay, so I've just replaced sort of the default information with my own code here. The first thing you're going to see in this YAML file is you've got the name of the YAML file itself. Make sure that that matches what you've got up here. Next, you can actually, group your different YAML files and your different jobs and pipelines. So let's say that you need a group for your staging environment team, or you have a team on the West Coast and you want to make sure all of their pipelines are grouped separately. You can use the group keyword right here. Below that, you're actually going to indicate how each job gets kicked off. So one of the most sort of fundamental parts of building a pipeline is the automation, right? So when one job finishes, you need to instruct it when the next job should start. So we've got a few things here. It says on workflow dispatch. This basically gives you the ability to start a job manually. We also have the ability for a job to start on a push on the main branch or a pull request on the main branch. So you can change those options if you have more than one branch in your repository. Just make sure to indicate it there. If you don't want jobs to start automatically on a push request, you can just delete that line. Next thing you're going to see is the actual jobs themselves. So here I've labeled my first job pre-test, and under pre-test, I've got all the out-of-the-box testing, the test matrix basically, that makes sure that my Julia package works with different versions of Julia. So you've got sort of the name of the test, you've got some outputs, you have the actual steps that are involved in this job. And when I show you it kick off, you'll kind of see how these steps look in the UI. After that, I would just want to show you some of the other jobs I've created. I have another job called start, and this start job actually only kicks off once the pre-test job has completed. So you can use the needs keyword here and make sure that it points to the previous job. This one has 2 outputs and 2 steps. And once those steps have completed and passed, the next job kicks off, and that job I've labeled build. My build job also has sort of 2 instructions here. Again, for this demo, these are just outputting very basic information like hello world, but you would, in real life, you'd replace this with like unit tests. And those unit tests can actually live in external files. You would just indicate in your code the source of that file, and you'd input it here. Last, we will have a job called production ready. Again, this production ready job only starts once the previous job called build has completed. So we can go ahead and we can actually commit these changes to our YAML file. So we'll say that we updated the ci.yaml, and then we're going to hit commit changes. Okay, and now if you go to your actions tab, you're actually going to see that pipeline start. So you can click on it. And let me sort of come and make the UI a little easier to follow. And so what you're seeing now is this is the pipeline or the workflow that you just saw in the code. So you've got sort of the 3 things that are going to happen in that pre-test section. And once these complete, it'll kick off the next section, which is called start, and then build and prod. So I actually want us to sort of sit here for a couple seconds and like watch this stuff happen live. While that's happening, what I can tell you about CI is that my experience with CI is there's a lot of tools that exist that sort of help you do a lot of this testing. You have, unit tests, sanity tests, security tests. You actually can do other kinds of automation. So GitHub Workflows is great because it's not just used for CI. You can do all kinds of automated testing and integration work in GitHub Actions. CI is just one piece of like a bigger puzzle. Okay, so we're almost done with like sort of loading this first part of our tests. It's got one more job to run. And as you can see, those have passed. So it's on to the next part. And in our start jobs, we've got sort of 2 steps. It's going to echo hello and then echo world. That job is complete, and it'll go back and it'll start the next section, right? So go back. And you're going to see the build section is started. Let's wait like 1 more second and it'll move to prod ready. There we go. So this is CI in GitHub Actions with Julia. Okay, I hope you followed along. And obviously I want you to sort of go in and try this out yourself. There's documentation online, and if you really need help, you can email me. Happy to walk you through it. All right, so the next thing we're going to do in our demo is we're actually going to go back into JuliaHub, and I want to show you a feature that also works with Git and GitHub to help you kind of keep your code changes in sync. So opening up JuliaHub, let me go to a logged in version. Okay. So in JuliaHub, we have a new feature. You can actually find it in the navigation menu. It's called projects. So when I go to projects, you're going to see a bunch of projects here. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add a project. And the cool thing about adding a project is it's extremely easy to use with GitHub. I just go to the URL that I'm adding the project from, copy that, paste that into here to indicate that it's coming from a GitHub repository. If I'd like to, I can add a project description, assign it to a group. I'm going to keep all that as is. The only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make this project private so that my entire org is not having to, pay attention to it. So I'm creating a private project, confirm. So what this is doing now on JuliaHub is it is pulling in the GitHub files. Now I can use them locally within the JuliaHub ecosystem or on my instance itself. So if we give that a little bit of time, it'll actually pull all those files in. And once those files are in, I can launch that project. Okay. All right, so I have a previous project I pulled in. I'm just going to launch that just so we can speed this demo up. So this project is called demo example. It's also a newly generated Julia package. I'm going to go ahead and get that one started for you. Okay, so as you can see, when you launch a project, it actually goes back into the IDE. And here we have the package, the demo example. So what I'm doing now in my demo example package is I'm going to the source folder and I'm going to the actual, main Julia package file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit the code here. So right now, this code is just, a greeting function and it prints out the word hello demo. If we wanted to change what it prints out, maybe it prints out hello deep, then I can do that. And what you're going to see once you save that change is on the left-hand side, you've got this little source control icon. If you click on it, it's captured that you've made a change to your file. So if you know how get works, you have to have a message go along with every commit, every change. So we can say here that we've updated, updated the text in the code. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to commit that change. And basically, the projects feature is going to provide the functionality to sync this directly with the GitHub repository. Oh, I didn't set this one up correctly. Okay, let me go back really quick. Okay. So essentially, what it's supposed to do is it's going to push these changes up to GitHub. And then when I go into GitHub, what I'm going to see in my source folder is any changes that I made to the demo package 10 Julia file. The reason we built this feature is because if you are making changes and another team member is making changes and you want to keep those in sync, not just inside the files on JuliaHub, but also in the repositories on GitHub, that is what the projects feature is going to do for you. So sorry that this part of the demo didn't work. It's just because I didn't have my Git set up correctly. The last thing I want to demo is how you can pull in your Julia package into your local Julia package registry. So if we go back into the JuliaHub UI, I'm going to go to a section called contribute. And in the contribute section, we're going to have a register packages area. In register packages, all I need to do is go back to the package that I created, copy the URL, and then I can paste that URL right here. Once I paste that, I can then select which registry I want to request this package be added to. You can request to add it to the Julia general package registry. We've got some requirements for that. Or you can add it to one of your local registries. So here I've got a number of local registries in my JuliaHub instance. I'm going to go ahead and add it to the GitHub one. I hit submit. In about a minute, it'll pull in those package files and it'll open a request to my team to go ahead and add that package to our registry. Cool. Okay, so that concludes the demo. I'm now going to sort of go back to the end of my presentation. So going back to the presentation slides, we will wrap things up. Okay, reshare. All right. Great. So to wrap things up, just wanted to go over some of the things I showed you. So we showed you how to launch applications and navigate, between CPU, GPU resources in JuliaHub. Then we created a new Julia package with the PKG templates package. We uploaded that package to GitHub. We then saw the template include the ci.yaml file. We made some changes to that YAML file and we saw how our pipeline worked. After that, We edited code together using GitHub projects. Potentially, we made changes to it, and that those changes synced back to my GitHub repository. And lastly, I showed you that you can just grab your GitHub repository name, go into JuliaHub UI under the Contribute tab, paste it, and then it'll actually make a pull request to add your repository to your local registry or the Julia general package registry. I want to note that the projects feature is in limited release. So if you're using JuliaHub already and you don't see the feature, just email me or contact your account rep. We'll get it started for you. And hopefully, you'll be off to the races. So thanks for today's presentation. I will now take some questions. And I wanted to say thank you for watching this presentation. I know I covered a lot, but hopefully you got to see really what JuliaHub is for and the power of the JuliaHub ecosystem. Okay, so let me stop share. So let me actually just, stop sharing. And then I'm going to look at some of the questions. Okay. So one of the questions is, can I use JuliaHub to store experimental data required by the code up to a few gigabytes? Yes. So so JuliaHub itself can store massive amounts of information. It comes with storage. We have different subscriptions of JuliaHub. There's a free version, and the free version I think is like 1 or 2 gigabytes of storage. But the team subscription and of course the enterprise subscription comes with a lot more storage, and you can store all your data sets, all your experimental data, all within JuliaHub, in the data folder, in the code folder. We actually have a feature that's going to let you navigate your folders in JuliaHub itself, and you'll be able to store files that large for sure. Okay. Another question I have. Can you connect JuliaHub to a private Git repo hosted on Azure, much like you showed for a public GitHub repo? I don't know the direct answer to that question. So right now, the UI in JuliaHub is set up to pull in repositories from GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket. So what I can do is I can get back to you on whether we can pull in Azure repositories as well. If not today, it's definitely something we'll put on our roadmap. Last question I've got, can data sets be shared with my team like the projects can? Yes, so the data sets are basically going to be uploaded to a folder that in JuliaHub that's accessible by anyone in your organization. And there's a section in the JuliaHub UI that you can go to called data sets. You can navigate through that section. Your team members should be able to access any data sets that you made public, and it'll be accessible by only people that are within your org. And that's how you can share it with them. Okay, well, that's all the questions I got. Misha, back to you.
Deep, thank you very much for a very informative and interesting presentation. To everyone who attended, thank you so much for joining us today. As promised, we'll be sending out a link to the recording of this webinar in the next day or so, and you'll receive it there. And thank you for joining us. And of course, if you have any additional questions, you're welcome to contact Deep directly, or you can email us at info@juliacomputing.com. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.